our wonderful mom, Lee Whitesell, has agreed to sit with us and let us hear some of the stories from her life. So thank you, Mom, for doing this. And what you originally were talking about earlier today in preparation for this was beginning with your birth. So do you want to begin there?
Okay, I was born on Monroe Street, 105 Monroe Street. At that time, way back in 1924, there weren't hospital births. There were births at home. The doctor came and delivered the baby. And that's where I was born.
Dude, on a little tiny screen.
Okay, Mom, please tell us about your birth.
My what?
About your birth.
Oh, yes, I remember that very clearly. I was born at my home, which was at my grandmother's house. We lived at my grandmother's house at that time, at 105 Monroe Street in Brooklyn. And that's all I know about it. I weighed 9 pounds. I was a big baby. I had a brother a year and a half older than me. My brother had polio before I was born, and therefore I learned to walk before he did.
How old were you when you walked?
Oh, about 9 months old. We would have
And
thought
what-
I'd be an athlete, but it was no asset to me to have walked so young.
And what was the date of your birth?
10/9/24.
Okay. And so you said that all births back in those days and funerals too were happening in people's homes?
Oh yes, there were no funeral homes, and people didn't go to the hospital to have babies. They just were born at home. In fact, I remember when my sister was born at home. I was in a neighbor's house, and somebody came down to get me and said, "You have a new baby sister," which was a complete surprise to me. I was 4.5 years old at the time when she was born. My sister, Anna Mae. One brother, Harry, a year and a half older, and one sister.
Anna Mae.
Yes.
So both of them were blue-eyed blondes, as I understand.
Yes, right. That was the look that seemed to be more appreciated in my house. At least that was the impression I get. But anyway, I was dark hair, dark eyes.
And you said at grammar school that Harry wore a brace on his leg?
Yes, because of the polio. Yes, he did. But he was very handsome, very popular, kind of devilish, and all my classmates' girls wanted to get to know him.
Yeah. And you also spoke about your sister Anna Mae, and your mother used to roll up her blonde hair into curls.
Oh yes, she did. Every night she had to get her hair rolled up, and my father had to patch her mosquito bites, which she scratched all year long. So it was a constant battle with her about those mosquito bites.
And one year she had kidney disease.
Yes, she was in bed for almost, I don't know, 9 months. I don't know how long. Anyway, under a tent. It was called Bright's disease. I don't know much about it, except it was serious. And in those days, they didn't have the medicines they have now.
And how was your health?
My health was excellent. I was absent 4 days in grammar school because I got the grip, they called it. I guess they would call it the flu now. And I was isolated because that's when my sister was very ill. But I did recover. She didn't catch it, and that was the extent of my absence in grammar school.
How about high school?
Well, high school, I was absent 1 day a year when my best friend, May Ramshon, and I took off for New York City and went to the Paramount. And we were in different classes in Dominican high school, so nobody noticed that we were both absent on the same grade level, but different classes. Loved May because she was always lots of fun. We did crazy things. Went to the movies every Saturday in St. Albans. It only cost 10 cents to go to the movies then. You saw 2 pictures and a newsreel because there was no television. And you saw a serial. That at the end of the 15 minutes, there was always a catastrophe, and you thought the hero was dead. And you came back the next week, and lo and behold, he was still very able. But we didn't care about that. We just went to go to the movies.
And after that you went out to eat or something?
Oh, we always,
Potato salad?
didn't have much to eat. We liked potato salad, yes, I told you that. Both of us like to eat potato salad, so we go to a little deli and get a plate of potato salad. That's why we liked each other. We liked the same things, crazy things. Of course, we did buy candy bars going into the theater. You could buy 3 great big bars, almost twice the size they are now, for 10 cents.
Wow.
10 cents for the movie, 10 cents for the candy, probably 10 cents for the potato salad.
And on Sundays, what did you do on Sundays? Your grandmother's house?
Oh, Sunday we always went to my grandmother's house. Absolutely, that was a command performance. But she had loads of company. All her friends and relatives were there, and her porters that were upstairs, and we all were there for dinner in the big dining room. I should show you the picture of the brownstone house she lived
Show that.
in Brooklyn. I loved going to my grandma's house, especially when Ann and Grace were there. Ann and Grace were 2 little children who were kind of abandoned by their mother, and a friend brought them over to my grandmother's house and said, "Will you keep these little babies till Thanksgiving? It's almost Thanksgiving." They were 2 and 3, I think. And she said, "Oh, of course." Well, then they decided they better keep them till Christmas. Well, by the time they had them that 6 weeks, they just never let go. Nobody ever questioned them. I mean, you didn't have to adopt them or anything, but I thought they were truly my mother's sisters. I was brought up to believe that. And much later, when I was in high school, one of my friends told me, "You know, your 2 aunts are really not your aunts, they are adopted." And I ran downstairs, my grandmother happened to be there, and I said, "Were Ann and Grace adopted?" And she said, "Absolutely not." Well, the truth, that was true, because they weren't adopted, they just moved in. So, but they couldn't be ever any closer if they were my mother's real close sisters, because we loved them. And they were the ones that made the visit to Brooklyn so special, because they were young, they were teenagers, and then they had boyfriends, and then they got married, and it was all very exciting. Their 2.
Were they living there with their husbands in the same house?
Yes, they did. They moved in. It was the brownstone houses could have 4 floors, and they had 2 apartments up. They each had their own apartment upstairs. And the sad part about this story is that when Grace had her first baby, they did have hospitals then, and the baby was born, and unfortunately the staph germ went through the hospital, and 5 of the mothers died, and she was one of them. So it was very sad, especially when we saw them carry out the crib and all the baby things. And she went to live with the father's sister, Biddy Ann, her name was. Later she became a nurse and a nun, and
The daughter of Grace.
the daughter of Grace, Betty Ann, her name was, and Ann Whitson, her sister, told me that that's what Grace always wanted to be, was a nurse and a nun. And lo and behold, her daughter became a nurse and a nun, and she was the head of the Chicago Hospital of Nursing staff there or something at one time.
And what was the Grace's wake like? And where was it held?
Oh, it was right in the house. They would put a wreath of flowers on the door at that time to indicate a wake was taking place. And it was right in the living room of the house, and it was tragic. It was tragic, and I was heartbroken. But I was very young. I was 8 years old, and I can remember going up to the 3rd floor where there was a bedroom and all the cousins were in there. And we just had a good time up there. Then we'd come down and be sad, and then we'd go up there and have a good time. And it's just... But when you're 8 years old, you go through all stages. And I can remember being in the schoolyard after she died, and just walking around and not wanting to talk to anybody because I felt so bad. So it was a lingering sadness, but not all the time. It just was there in the back of your head.
But Ann was still there, and she was living with Bud at that time.
Oh, so they were married. They then had Bob and Steve, and it was
While they were
wonderful to
still
go
there.
in and visit them and see those little boys.
So
Still, every Sunday it was at Grandma's house.
okay.
So that was typical of what we did. We drove in the old Durant. Dad had a Durant, and on a cold night, I think to start the car, he'd have to get the crank out and crank the car and turn it around. Finally, we'd get started. But we three children would be in the back, covered up with a heavy wool blanket. There was no heat in the car. When we got home, he would have to start up the fire, the coal fire again. It was it was banked while you were away. And it was freezing in the house, but it warmed up fast, and the steam radiators, and old-fashioned way of doing things.
And you also had vacations at Bayside?
Oh, Bayside at that time they had a beach, and it was beautiful. My grandmother had a little house, and her sister had a house next door, and we swam in the bay, and we had a wonderful time. And the city took it over and made it a highway, so that's how we ended up going to Rocky Point, and my grandmother's sister went to Breezy Point, which was out near Coney Island.
You
We were
mentioned,
way out on Long Island at Rocky Point.
you mentioned that one time on the way to Bayside, which was fairly close to the city, so it wasn't as far out on the island as
Oh, it
Rocky
wasn't,
Point.
nowhere near, it wasn't on the island at all. It was part of the city.
But you mentioned that once you had an old Ford and a wheel.
Oh, well, I don't remember it, but my aunt tells the story of, they had one of those first Model T Fords, I guess, and they were coming down a hill towards Bayside, and they said, oh my gosh, look at this, a wheel rolling down, who lost a wheel? All of a sudden, they found out it was their car. I was not in the car at the time, and how the outcome. Of course, they didn't go very fast in those cars anyway, but it was downhill, and the wheel was rolling away.
So you mentioned that Rocky Point was built in 1929, and what were the stages of building it?
I don't know if it was built in the lot was there in they bought the 2 lots in 1929.
Okay.
And we went out to a tent was put up so we could drive out. It took in the old Durant, it took a couple of hours to drive from St. Albans to Rocky Point. And we would get into our bathing suits in the tent and go down and have a wonderful time on the beach. Hardly anybody there at that time. And eventually they built instead of the tent, they had a platform in the tent, and then the tent was dispersed with, and they built a wooden bungalow, which was just one bungalow, little 4 rooms, living room, kitchen, and 2 bedrooms, separated by plasterboards or something. It was just for camping, kind of.
And you had an outhouse?
Oh, yes, we had an outhouse.
You had to
And
walk
we had an
outside?
ice box. We had to go buy the ice in the ice house and put it in the ice box. And, no heat or anything like that.
Then you added a few
Oh,
other
then
rooms?
they added the back porch and then the front porch, and they became extra bedrooms because people came from all over and slept in the living room, which was very little. Each bedroom, the porch, the back porch, and eventually my kids, Bob and I don't know Bob and Jeff, and Dad built another bedroom and a bathroom because the plumbing was put in.
So what was there before the plumbing?
The pump. That water was 224 feet underground,
Oh,
and you couldn't pump it up to. Well, anybody who wasn't strong couldn't. We'd have to jump up and grab the handle and put all our weight, jump and get it down. Even then, it was very hard to get water.
and even before that, you took
We went up to the clubhouse to get milk cans full of water, and then they put it in a big galvanized garbage can. It was a brand new garbage can, galvanized, and that was water for doing dishes and washing. And
Interesting.
but that was all right. We loved it. We didn't care. We got a nice bath in the ocean every day.
And you had, instead of going shopping, you said trucks came by the house?
Oh, well, the vegetable man came in the truck. The baker came. Oh, we loved going out to catch the baker man because we all got our donuts and things. We could pick out what we wanted, and that was fun. Yes, most of the things we could pick. There was a general store where you could buy meat. There was an ice cream store. All the kids, when I was older, all the teenagers would go down and gather in the ice cream store and hang out. Yeah, it was a wonderful life out at Rocky Point.
And who was out there with you? You mentioned your grandmother and the Whitsons.
Yeah,
You want
Ann
to talk
Whitson
about
and her
them?
2 babies, and we had a wonderful.
And what was
Crowded in that little house, but we didn't feel crowded at all. It was just a place to sleep, really.
You mentioned shuffleboard.
Oh, that was much later.
Oh,
That was
okay.
much later when Harry's Bar had a shuffleboard.
Oh,
And so while my parents were there, we took advantage of the babysitters, and we'd go out and meet some friends, and they had a shuffleboard. I don't know if anybody knows what a shuffleboard is. You throw the things down the
Yeah.
alley. And my grandmother would say, "Oh, you two, you'll be shuffling that baby." I was pregnant at the time. "You'll be shuffling that baby down the shuffleboard next year." So she thought we sort of overdid the going out.
So do you want to talk about what your high school experience was like?
Well, I went to Dominican Commercial High School because that's